got somebody's attention and we have an interview. All right, what does that mean? Let's talk about it. So there, again, there's a lot more to an interview than the point that you are sitting having that conversation with the interviewer, right? And it starts with preparing for an interview. We'll talk about what to do during the interview. And we're going to talk about something called the STAR model, which is used in behavioral-based interview questions. Most companies use behavioral-based interview questions. We'll talk about that later, what that means. We're actually going to do a little bit of practicing, so you're actually going to have to speak. And so that's why I'm trying to energize you again. We'll do a little bit of practicing today, but the real practice will be next Saturday, when you're going to have the opportunity to do 4 mock interviews. And this is with people in the industry that someday might be interviewing you for real. So that's pretty exciting. All right. So what happens before the interview? Before I show that, what do you guys think? What are some of the keys to before the interview?
Julie, do you want them in chat, in person?
Whichever they want to do it. I'd love to hear their voices, but if they want to put it in chat.
Before the interview, you should have some knowledge on like what you're getting interviewed for in the company.
Excellent. And I see that in the chat too. Research the company, prepare questions, dress well. All right, you guys are already pros, but we're going to go through this anyway. Oops, wrong one. There. Okay. So the very first thing is you're interviewing for a specific job at a specific company, right? So the first thing you want to do is research that company, understand what they're doing. If you have 3 interviews in 2 days at 3 different companies, don't go thinking that I'm going to do the same thing and for those 3 places. Those are 3 different companies. Find out about what they are, what makes them unique, perhaps, or what they hang their hat on, what, etc. So find out about that company. And of course, there's a number of different ways to do that through Google and social media and the company website itself. Also, sometimes you know the names of the people you will be interviewing with. Other times you don't. If you know their names, you can research the actual people you're going to be interviewing. Maybe find out about them. Maybe there's a point in the conversation at the interview that you can say, I understand you've been in the industry for many years. How does this company compare to some of your previous companies you've worked? You could ask them that, because you've had a chance to research them. And then, of course, the job description. As a specific job that you're going for, understand that job description. Now, it might be a case where you don't have everything that's put as qualifications, but you're going to have some of those. And by the way, that might always be true. Don't worry about having everything on that list, but figure out where your skills map to that job description, because that's what you're going to want to emphasize as strengths during that job interview. All right. So match up kind of what you're prepared to say with the job description you're giving. So that's your number 1 step. Research on the company, possibly the interviewers, and really taking a good look at that job description and mapping it to your skills. The second step we're going to talk more about later. I keep saying that, and I will keep saying that. And that's your prepping for answering these behavioral-based questions. Okay. The way you prep for those is make yourself some notes that can be in front of you during the meeting. And what they are is quick reminders of different projects or experiences you've had. And the reason you'll find out later, I'll bring this up again later when we talk about behavioral-based questions, but you're going to refer to actual experiences, actual projects in order to answer the questions live. So kind of a recap that's quick to look at is a really smart idea. And they'll be right in front of you during the interview. The third one, somebody said that, and I'll look, oh good, people are answering too. I'll pause after the end of this and we'll look at those. Prepare questions to ask during your interview. Interviewer is not impressed when they at some point during the interview say, do you have any questions for me? And you say, no, I'm good. And it might even be the case that they actually already did answer all your questions by what they've told you, but you always need to be prepared to ask at least one question at that point. It shows that you're interested, you want to know more. So prepare those questions ahead of time. Some of them might be ones you use at different interviews, but again, make them specific to that company or that job. Maybe you're going to ask more about what the job is like, or the company culture, or something else about the company. Okay, so have a few prepared just in case they actually answer them ahead of them offering the chance for you to ask the question, but have some written down right in front of you going into the interview. All right, the fourth thing, Angie actually mentioned this, an elevator speech. Now, this is a normal interview is longer than one of these meetings with somebody that you want to know you, that you maybe only get an opportunity during an elevator ride. They generally say about 3 minutes for that. But even in an interview, they're probably going to open with some form of tell me about yourself. Now, at a normal length interview, you could go on for a while, maybe 5 minutes, maybe longer, but you don't want to go on too long. You don't want to tell them your entire resume and work experience when they ask you that question, right? Because they actually want to have a chance to ask very specific other questions of you during the interview. So practicing so you have the ability to summarize your education and key work experiences, especially the ones that pertain to that job, in about 3 minutes, right? And that's not a hard and fast thing, so don't get hung up on that. But the idea is, can I paint a picture of myself within a few minutes? That's really what, and you want to be able to do that just at any time, but in particular in an interview. And the last one, this is all the preparation before interview, and that's have all those things printed and ready to go. I would print them even if I'm doing a virtual interview, because I'm going to want to have them on the desk in front of me. Maybe you have them up, in electronically, but it's nice to have that print sometimes just in case. So what are those things? Again, your resume in front of you. And if you're going in person, you're going to have multiple copies of that to give them too. That job description, your questions you've prepared, your notes about the STAR behavioral based questions, right? And anything else you think would be helpful. And you don't want too much in front of you, but things that you can quickly refer to help you during the interview. So this is the key prep beforehand. Did we get all our questions answers? Or I know you guys are answering them as we go. Do any of those need to be vocalized, guys that are watching the chat?
I just had the one I added, which was, is it okay for them to have their notes in front of them and be visible to the interviewers in that way?
Absolutely. Even in an in-person, they may not even see it during a virtual, right? You can't see my desktop right now. I've got notes for talking to you right in front of me right now. Oh, I hate virtual backgrounds. Okay. Absolutely. In fact, I probably would be impressed if you had a few things out and ready to go, and if you're sitting there reading as you're answering me, no. But if you're using them to refresh your mind and talk to me, absolutely. Katie, you agree?
Yes, I do. And then Tanisha asked a question about, can you highlight some of your hobbies when they're in that elevator speech? I would say yes, especially if they, because truthfully, companies and managers are looking for well-rounded individuals, and a lot of times your hobbies will show that. I wouldn't spend a lot of time on them, but especially if those hobbies pertain to a passion. You like to travel because you want to help the world type of thing, so you like to travel and do some volunteer, or anything like that you can wrap into, showing your interests. I think that's valuable for that. And what do you say, Julie?
Yeah, I would agree. We're not looking for a bulleted list in that, but if there's a connection to that job or company, absolutely. And I love what you said, Katie. B, if it really is a passion of yours. One of the questions I will often ask in interviews is, tell me what you're passionate about, right? So I agree with that, Katie.
One question I had, so I did this once I was like my sophomore year of college, and I really wanted an internship for that summer. But usually they hire, more juniors, seniors. So what I did is I came in and I built like a little app to show kind of something like for the company. And then I got to show that off. Like, and that made me really stand out. So if you really, really want a job, like coming in and being like, oh, because it was like a medical company that did stuff with medication. So I made a little like app that like could add stuff to a list. And then that really impressed them. And I could talk about that code and kind of shoot. So that's an idea if you like really like want to stand. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Katie, Julie, Angie?
Oh, I think that's
great. Yeah.
off the
I would have hired you on the spot. So that's good.
Yeah, no, that's what got me the internship though for my sophomore year. Because usually they don't hire sophomores, but I was like, I really wanted it. And they, so.
Yeah. So think about those type of preparations as well, because obviously that's not something you just produced during the interview. You had to have forethought to do that and create that.
Yeah. Devonna, did that answer your question? You know, there's a lot of different things that you do. Devonna asked, how can you stand out and seem more personable, you know, when you're doing that elevator speech? It's just really being yourself and highlighting, you know, some of the things that you've done that you think are going to make you stand out. How you do that, it's up to you.
Yeah. I'm actually going to talk a little bit more of that in a minute, but Katie, I agree with everything you just said. So first of all, making it not a list of things. It is a conversation now. We're moving away from resume and LinkedIn. It is a conversation. So can you get those key things into a 3-minute conversation, a speech, right? It's a mini speech, and don't get hung up on that word speech, but it is a conversation. So make it show your ability to converse, right? As you're describing those things. Doing a good job of that tells me you're a good communicator. And we'll talk a little bit more about some aspects of that, but it's an opening salvo, not only to tell them about yourself, but to show some of your main communication skills, which are key, right?
Julie, one thing I thought of when you said that was, I know too, in like programming interviews, especially, like they'll have you like whiteboard an answer. And sometimes they ask you like really, really hard questions that nobody can really get, but they want to see, not that you can like maybe solve it, but that you can explain your thought process. And you can like talk about like what you're thinking and like kind of that. So that's one thing too that helps a lot.
You just gave away a big secret in the tech world. That is absolutely right. I don't know how many times we have college grads who fail that part of it because they think they need to come out with the perfect code or pseudocode to answer that. And all those experienced engineers were looking for was for them to ask some questions and get some clarification, right? And to make an attempt at it. And so never think that there's a perfect answer or a right answer or anything like that in an interview. You, especially if it's where they're giving you some form of a thing to solve or question to answer like that. It's about how you approach. How do you problem solve? How do you think it through? That's what people are looking for. Now, I don't know how soon you'll get those type of interviews. Maybe that happens during some of these internships, possibly not till later on, but that's a really good tip. What else we got here? Yes, we will be talking about the personality questions. Do you mean the behavioral based questions, Sharitha?
Yeah, just like talk about yourself, that sort of question. Could we talk about what we're gonna do like in the near future?
Oh, absolutely, especially at this point in your career. Just like in the resume, you know, if you have aspirations for certain careers or even certain majors at this point, that absolutely can be part of that conversation, because that is really an important thing about you, right? All right, I'm going to move on, but somebody can keep an eye if we've still got some questions out there. Okay. So day of the interview. Tell me 2-3 things you think is important day of the interview. You're good on the last one.
Well, one thing, especially for the virtual ones, that I had a problem with during my interview last year is that I had never used like Zoom or whatever we used before. So my laptop like crashed during the interview. So
No.
that was really scary. So I would just say, make sure that your technology is working.
Excellent, Lexi. And showing up on time, absolutely.
Well, and maybe have a backup plan, right? If that technology isn't working, if you have another device that you could quickly utilize, something like that. Julie's using 2 devices today. So, right, Julie?
Yeah. Yep. And Devna, you nailed it. And I'm going to come back and talk about that in a minute here. Okay.
Yeah. And I would like to add that a lot of times companies do start with a phone screen versus a virtual interview. And truthfully, nowadays with cell phones, we get a lot more dropped calls when we're doing interviews. So, you know, if it's dropped, a lot of times as a recruiter, I keep talking because I don't realize the call has dropped yet. So as the applicant, you know, as the candidate, try calling back as soon as you realize that the call has dropped. It happens. Don't worry about it. It's actually, unfortunately, pretty common today for that to happen. So.
Excellent, Katie. Okay, so there's a number of things we want to do day of the interview. Now, what we have here is we've listed, there's some things that you'll do only if it's an in-person interview and others if it's a virtual interview. And in some cases, you do it in both cases. But the dress for success, right? So especially next Saturday, wear business professional appropriate, or other words are business casual, but often you're even going one level above that, but business appropriate attire. And by the way, I'm barefoot today, but I do actually have a blouse on, not a t-shirt, trying to up my game because normally I wear t-shirts. But the dress is important. If somebody came in inappropriately dressed or on a virtual inappropriately dressed, there's just going to be a ding in my head, even if I think they're otherwise pretty good. So just remember that. I'm not going to talk as much today about, but you do want to make sure you're going to arrive on time if it's a physical interview. There's a couple of tips here on that. I am going to say if it's an in-person, get to the lobby well ahead, but don't contact the person who's to pick you up you're interviewing with 15 minutes before your interview. They're going to be busy on something else and just feel frustrated that you're already here. Be there, but ask the receptionist to contact them when it's more like 5 minutes ahead, okay? And the same thing with virtual. You want to be on a couple minutes early, but getting on too early, just they may not be ready, and then that's just a frustration. That's my feeling on that, Katie. If you think I'm wrong on that, comment.
No, I would agree. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Well, my quick thought would be they'll probably keep you in a waiting room, right? So
most people, a lot of times we don't use waiting rooms, but
got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
so
right.
it depends. So now there's a difference. If you're using Zoom, you can hit join and then there's a pre-step like to check your video and stuff. You can sit in there for a little bit before you hit that final join. Make sure you have the preview setting though, right? So then I can make sure I can do my checks, make sure everything's okay, and wait till a little closer to the time to hit the final button. Okay, we talked about having stuff in front of us. If it's in person, you're going to bring extra copies of your resume, but bring all those printed materials that we prepped. Have them set out either way in front of you so that you can refer to them. All right. Don't even bring your phone in, or certainly turn it off in person, but we're using technology here today, right? So I can't turn my technology off on a virtual interview, but my cell phone is do not disturb, volume off, notifications off, everything off possibly could be. And also on my iPad, which I'm actually using. So you have to be conscious of all those different things. You want all those things turned off or put away. You don't want to be disturbed for something that has nothing to do with the interview. But of course, on a virtual interview, we do need to check our technology. Lexi had that unfortunate experience. Whatever computer, laptop, and try to use a computer or laptop versus like a handheld, if possible, if you can. Make sure it's got power, right? It's plugged in, not just running on a battery, and that maybe have it up to date. just different things you can do. Check your speaker, check your mic, check your camera, check your background. Now, you can cheat and use the virtual background. I'm going to take mine off. Okay. Now what I have behind me, I know it's kind of small there. It's neat, but it's kind of busy because of my bookshelf, right? And in my normal work meetings, it's just like this, right? But if I'm going into an interview or interviewing somebody else and needing a more professional, then, and I can't do it someplace else, then I'm going to go ahead and put that virtual background on, right? So keep that in mind, what's behind you. Most of you, I see very good backgrounds, looks very, very good. There's nothing too busy or not neat or anything like that. So I think what I'm seeing right now, it looks good. But make sure of that, double check what that camera's seeing. Again, lighting, you want it at the front of your face, not so much behind you. The other thing in my room, I have windows behind me and I have the curtain shut, but I'm a little bit backlit. A little bit's okay, but I have a stronger light coming towards me from the back of the camera. Okay, and that's key. So that my face is lit up. I'm not backlit too badly. And you don't want it in front of the camera or the camera is going to be blinded towards the camera. So check on all those things. Check them maybe the night before, check them a half hour before. And then, as I said, if there's a two-step join in, like a preview step, you can actually check it before you hit that button. All right. Background space advice. Center your image. That's a really good point too. Yeah. I have my camera at the top of my monitor pretty much in the center. So I'm fairly centered, but keep an eye on that. Also, if you can, you actually want the camera a little bit up. Because if your camera is more down, or as some of you I know, and it's tough because of the technology you're using, you're looking down at it. Well, this is what it looks like to the person you're talking to, right? Your head down, it just doesn't look as energetic and up. And now you may not be able to do that based on your setup, that's okay. But if you can, like if you're using a laptop that's got it built in, maybe put it on top of a bunch of books, right? Something stable, right? So it's a little higher up. So it's a little more straight on or slightly up. Okay, that actually presents a better image of energy and sitting up. Okay, center your image. Okay, now, so we've done a thing. We did our prep leading up to the interview. We're in our right attire. We're on time. We've got our things set up. We've checked our technology. What's the last thing we do? And Devna nailed it. See my little Buddha? Center yourself. And I'm serious. The last thing before you hit join, or before you walk into that room, or the person's about to come into the lobby, I want you to take deep breath. And seriously, I want everybody to take a deep breath right now. A deep, slow breath in. And a slow exhale. You want to center yourself. You want to go into that interview calm and confident. You've already done your prep. Don't look at your notes one last time now. You've done your prep. We're going to center ourselves. We're going to slow ourselves down and present our best self, our calm and confident self. And Katie used an excellent word a minute ago, because our goal is to be our authentic self in that interview, right? So whenever we're answering questions, we don't have to try to put it in a certain way or pretend to be something we're not. We're going to be our authentic selves, which is awesome and is going to get us our jobs. It is going to get us where we want to go. You guys are already amazing, or you wouldn't have won this award. So you hang your hat on that, you do your prep, and then you center. A minute ago when we took a break, I knew I was presenting this next section. Guess what I did before I came back on camera? Okay, I'm ready. All right, it's really important. And Devna, you knew it. Congratulations on that. All right, now we've walked into the room. We've pressed join. What's the next thing that happens? What's important now?
Just like listen to the question and sort of answer more authentically, you said.
Yes, absolutely. There's one step before that.
You greet the people.
You got it. So we talked about your resume and your LinkedIn, both can be first impressions. But as far as a first impression with that actual person, even if it's virtually, this is it. This is the first impression. When we do this in person, I make everybody practice handshakes. Because it's so important in our previous world of how you connect initially with that person. Now, I suspect even as things get back to normal, maybe handshakes go by the wayside. I don't know, but we can still do this virtually. It's still important. So do you see the very first thing we have there? Smile. If you come in, so you're stressed and frowned, again, hopefully we're coming in centered, and that's a calm smile because you are authentically happy to meet them because this is a cool opportunity, right? So you are happy to meet them. You are going to smile and you are going to tell them that. You're going to have some form of, it's nice to meet you. Come up with a phrase that works for you. Practice it a little bit. Even record it. I actually will record. I recorded some of this beforehand. I wanted to make sure my fun song was coming through okay. How did I look? And that's not because I'm vain. I'm very obviously not if you see me normally. But it's because I need to know how it's coming across because I want them to connect. You're not going to see that many professionals maybe start with a bubbly song like that. That's me. That's the authentic me. So I want to be authentic and I want that person to be able to connect with me. So I need to be able to smile. I need to make eye contact. I'm looking into the camera right now, making eye contact with you. Now, one trick, it's hard to make eye contact with the camera unless you're an experienced actor. I have a picture of one of my favorite pictures of one of my nieces taped to the top of my camera. So I, in essence, sometimes talk to her. Hi, Murray. She knows she's up there. She says she needs to update the picture. She's in college now, and this was when she was about 8. But it helps me, right, to think that that's a person. Also, if, as Russ was mentioned, so I have a picture of them on screen too. If I center that right under my camera, I actually can probably just fine looking into that person's eyes that I'm seeing. If I'm talking right here because I've centered them just below the camera and as close to it as I can, it's going to appear to them that I am looking into their eyes and making eye contact. In person, eye contact is huge. If I'm answering all my questions in person like this, it's hard to think that you're going to be able to connect and do your job because all jobs need connection now. But so eye contact, we really stress in person. It's harder to see that you're making eye contact, but you still need to make eye contact, whether it's looking directly into the camera or into the person's eyes that you're seeing. That's okay if that's where your eyes mostly go, especially if you've got it near the camera. So it appears that you're looking in. And Daphne's doing it right now. I can see her looking right in at me and a smile. I love it. So again, we're gonna smile. We'll be centered and ready to present our authentic selves. We're making good eye contact in a way that's comfortable for us, and making a greeting. Thank you for seeing me, or it's nice to meet you. I'm very happy to be here today. Come up with what phrase you want, even practice it. I tell you, when I do speeches, I've over time, but by the way, I'm actually an introvert. Nobody believes that. Lots of years of practice. I will memorize my first few minutes because as many times as maybe I've even given the speech before, that first on, you can just go a little, it's like a little shock almost, even with experience. So I memorize my first little bit, like that saying, because once I'm past that, I'm into it and I can relax and just really speak authentically and say what I want to say. But you need to kind of get over that first part sometimes, at least for me. It might not work that way for you. So I would actually practice that opening. So you don't want it to be all stiff and everything, but practice it so it's natural and it clicks in. So I always use the same phrase, it clicks in. Nice to meet you, because that's what I always do when I open these up. Okay, so that's at least works for me. Now, normally we say stand up and acknowledge the interviewer. Again, you're going to do that via camera probably for a while longer. If you are in person, you do want to be standing up. If we're not shaking hands, you're doing the equivalent of shaking hands, maybe not even reaching out, but you're having an open expression. Maybe it's even a little bit of a bow. I guess we'll all figure that out. I don't know. But you acknowledge, right? And look them in the eye. Again, just at the start in particular, but throughout, speaking clearly and projecting confidence. Even if you're a little nervous, you're awesome, or you wouldn't have already won this award. So just own that. Get into your authentic yourself. You've centered yourself. Be confident. Be confident in you, because you can't be wrong, right? So if you are authentic and confident, you can be confident in you, if that makes sense. Forget the match to the job. We've already done our prep on that. Be confident in you. Okay. Again, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a question from Tanisha. During the interview, how do you make sure you come off as confident but not cocky?
That is a great question. And I sometimes don't like it when I have what seemingly arrogant people in an interview. I have hired some. I've not hired some because of that. And I think if you're being authentic, that's the key. So think that through. And I think if you have deep breath and centered yourself, I think it's easier to be authentic. I have learned, I could be wrong. But what I'm going to tell you too is record it and have somebody look at it, or practice in front of somebody and have them give you some feedback. In general, we want you to be talking about and portraying your strengths and all the great things you have done. So do not be afraid to do that. That is confidence, and that is things. If you're exaggerating things, if you're in your head thinking, I'm better than, maybe you're coming off as arrogant. If you're focused on you and your authentic you and not in comparison to anything else, you will be fine. Katie, anything to add there, Angie?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Julie. And for me, sometimes it's more how people answer questions about, well, I did this because no one else could do it. You know, when you're responding to questions like that, because with a lot of students, I'm asking, well, how did you become the lead of your project, your senior project team? Well, because I was the only one who could do it. No one else couldn't. I mean, I've had students say things like that to me.
Yeah.
So again, it's how you phrase and how you answer, questions, where sometimes it will come across as arrogance or cockiness, that yes, I'm the reason we got an A on this project. No one else. I'm the reason. You're part of a team and what you do is very critical, but don't come across like you were the only one or the reason why the team completed the project, things like that.
That's excellent, Katie. Spot on.
So quick comment, Julie and Katie, you just modeled this speak clearly and with confidence in those responses. And there is something to be said for pacing, right? So what I find, and this is just, I think, a product of nervousness. It's also a product, I think, of younger people who tend to speak quite quickly, right? So this is a generality. I realize that not all of you are doing this, but I would be practicing how what your cadence is, right? So when you're delivering a response, it's measured. It's like this. I'm talking to you. You want to make sure people aren't straining to kind of understand because you're speaking so quickly, right? we really want to understand what you have to say.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you a tip on that, because you can't suddenly change everything about yourself at once or change how you do this at once. And I do tend to speak fast, and it used to be a real problem in presentations and things like that. The thing that helped me start to change that is by adding pauses. So maybe I'm still going to say a couple of sentences, and it's maybe quicker than I would like. But if I can take a little bit of a pause before I start that next sentence, it helps. So it's pacing in a different way. But that was how I had to start, from just going for 5 minutes.
And you
I can still do.
probably took a breath in that, a few breaths in that.
Yes.
And I would say it's not uncommon. The most common thing I hear from my interview teams is when they start the interview, somebody is speaking a little bit too low for the volume. And so don't be put off again if somebody says, will you please speak up a little bit? Just realize you do need to speak up a little bit more because of the technology. It's a little bit different than when you're in a room with people talking. So, and don't let it throw you though too. It's very common, just like cell phone coverage dropping, so if you get asked to speak up, recognize that you need to speak up, or you need to get closer to the speaker and just continue on. Okay. Continue to be confident. It was nothing you did, but just adjust and go on.
Very good, Katie. And Angie, I like your point about cultures. Certainly US culture, eye contact is very much treasured, but so be aware of who you're interviewing with too. Maybe you're interviewing with a global company and their culture is different. That should have been part of your research perhaps, and that might change that. So, all right, so now we've gotten past the greeting. We're gonna continue to present a positive, perhaps smiling, but certainly positive demeanor throughout, and good eye contact. We'll talk about the star, I promise, in a minute. We'll go into more detail on that. So there is going to be that opportunity to ask a question. Well, first of all, if they ask you a question and you're not sure you understand what they're looking for, or how they really asked it, it's okay to ask a clarifying question, right? Where did you mean this, or can you clarify? You can even just say that. Can you clarify that a little more? And certainly, if given the opportunity, ask at least one question about the company or about the job or the culture or anything along that line. Be prepared, have a few questions. We talked about that. Also, at the end, it is okay. Katie has reassured me that it is okay to ask, can you tell me what the next steps are? Or can you tell me when I might hear back? Those are absolutely okay things to ask at the end. And then, of course, we're going to thank them for their time. So opposite of the greeting, we're signing off now. We're thanking them for their time, good eye contact on saying goodbye, signing off. And the other thing is, along the way, and do that at the end, if you haven't been able to do it along the way, is get the contact information of everybody you talk to along the way. Okay, and if you can do that as you go, sometimes I've had, after they've seen 5 people and they've asked me for the contact information of those 5 people, it's like, I can tell you mine, right? So as if you're getting more than one interview at a company, ask towards the end of each one. Okay.
And Julie, nowadays, most of the time companies will send out a confirmation email to the candidate, that of course nowadays includes the link to either the Zoom or the Teams or whatever they're using. And in there, you usually will get the full names and titles of everybody you will be meeting with. Yes. And you'll have at least one email address from the recruiter or from the coordinator, and look at their email address. Is it first initial last name? Is it first name period last name? You can pretty much guess then that that's going to be the email for every person you're meeting with. Companies most of the time have the same format. It's either first initial last name or first name period last name at the company. So it's a quick shortcut to sending thank you emails.
Yes, Russ has made a couple of comments there. Yes, don't bring up money at all. And managers don't like to talk about the money with you, and it's discouraged. HR is who you talk money with, and that is only towards the end. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to go into this one right here. We need to provide clear and concise examples during the STAR model. Well, what does that mean? All right. So I mentioned these words before. Behavioral-based interviewing is something, again, most companies use this. There might be some exceptions. You might get some that just say, tell me what skills you have, or drill you on the skills, but most will use some form of this for at least part of the interview. And it is really key for the company. May not be key for you, but it is key for the company, because if done right, it gives them a predictor for how you might behave in future situations that are similar to what they ask. And they have found that that is a better predictor of a candidate really being a good candidate and being successful than if I just ask them about their skills. And that's what they're trying to do, is figure out if you are the best fit for them. Okay, so what does that mean? So first of all, I want to tell you a behavioral-based question. We'll see, go into these some more, but basically it's a very open-ended question. So it's not, do you know Java? I can answer that yes or no, right? There'll be questions like this. Tell me about a time when you faced a conflict while working on a team. How did you handle that? Okay. So I'm presenting a scenario to you and asking you to elaborate on it. Now, when you elaborate on it, we're going to teach you a way to do that, that you fully give them the answer, the information that they're looking for. There's no right or wrong answer, but giving them the information fully that they're looking for, because that's key for them to being able to use this. And they'll get frustrated. Hopefully they'll ask further if they don't get it, but they'll get frustrated if they can't get that out of you. So your goal is to give the interviewer the complete picture they're looking for that question. So we use the STAR model to make sure that we do that. All right, this is a build out. Sorry. So STAR stands for, I guess it was over here, situation, task, action, and result. So they've asked you a question. There's probably some form of conflict or certainly open-endedness about the question. Like in this case, it actually used the word conflict. Tell me about a time when you faced a conflict while working on a team. So first of all, whenever they ask you one of these, they're looking for a specific time. Not if you say, in general, I tend to handle it by doing X, Y, Z, they're going to come back and say, can you think of a specific time where you had that? So you're going to describe the specific situation that you're using to answer the question. So do you remember what we said about prepping for STAR questions? We're going to write down just all the different projects, experiences, volunteer projects, anything. And so that's let's say I ask you that question. Tell me about a time when you faced a conflict while working on a team. I'm going to say, well, 3 of these projects were team-based. Oh, and I remember there was a conflict in this one. Okay. At that point, I'm going to explain that project, the situation, and the conflict. I'm going to explain that. So that's the S in STAR. T, if I hit the right thing, that's the problem with using 2 things, Russ. I keep forgetting I need to swipe over here. Task. Explain just your relationship in that situation. So I was one of a team of 4. My job was X. And you've also explained the conflict, then tell them what action did I do to resolve that conflict or to complete that project. Depending on how the question was asked, it's often something that you need to do something about. So what action did I do to change things? Hopefully to rectify the situation, but maybe at least to attempt to change it. So that's the action part of STAR. And lastly, you're going to explain to them the result. So in my question, tell me about a time when you faced a conflict while working at a team. How did you handle that? I might say, while I was working on project beta, and my job was within the team that I needed to keep all of the build files clean. There was a situation where another group in the company was making changes that kept breaking the build files. And so I actually set up a meeting with a person from that group so that I could take a look at why we were hitting heads and work that out so that they could understand why our project was important. And as a result, the conflict stopped happening and we were able to go with complete builds. That's a pretty good, I made that up right there. That was good BS. Now, never BS. I'm just trying to quickly give an example, but situation, I'm describing the project a little bit. My responsibility is the task within there. What action did I take in pertaining to the situation and what was the result?
Julie,
Yep.
Caroline has asked, how recent should the example in a STAR response be? If you are in college, would an example from high school be okay?
Absolutely, it can be any time. There is no time frame in here. I doubt I could come up with a high school example if I was interviewed today, probably because I just can't remember my high school days. Too long ago. But it does not matter time frame. It's okay. You can use a volunteer experience, a high school experience, or anything.
So it's really more the relevance that you're striking for.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Did it have a team situation that had a conflict and that you did an action to? That is all that matters.
Yeah. If you do think you have a couple examples, you can say, I have a couple examples I could use. One was very recent and one was, about a year ago. Do you have a preference? You could ask the interview team that, and they might say, let's start with the most recent. And then if you give them a complete star in your answer, it is actually unusual. And they may then say, oh my gosh, she answered the question and gave me everything I was looking for. So now we have time to say, well, tell me about that other example you mentioned. Hopefully the more examples they get, the better picture they're going to get of how you have acted. And that's going to give them a better picture if you're the best fit for the position based on how you have performed. So by giving them a complete star up front, you might have a chance to share more information with them. So if you do have multiple situations you can draw from, tell them that and ask them if they have a preference.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. So again, we're saying again, but one of the things, again, describe a specific situation. So if you're saying typically, generally, usually, you're not doing a specific one, right? Think back to one. And I know I have this here somewhere. The interviewer knows they are asking you this type of question. It's okay to pause. You might even take a couple of minutes to think through and find the example. It's not going to come like this because you don't know what question they're going to ask, right? So you have to find a situation that meets that. So it's just be comfortable with sitting and thinking and coming up with a good example. That's what they want you to do, even if it takes a couple minutes. So just understand that it's okay. So find that situation. Again, describe what you did. Don't say the team then enacted a new process. No. I did the first part of a new process that the team worked on, and I focused on this part X, right? Has to be what you did. And again, things that you actually did, not that you would have done, except when you talk about the result, you might say, and here's what I learned, and I actually would do this part differently next time. It's okay as part of a result and a learning to talk about future things, but otherwise it's what you actually did. And again, that should then be in past tense.
Hey, Julie, wouldn't you also recommend to the girls that, to the ladies here, that one of the things you can do when they ask you that question and you're taking that pause, write down star and just kind of put a one word note to yourself and then give your answer.
That would be perfectly fine and a pretty good idea. And maybe even, you know, you might hit an interview where they don't ask you one of these, but you could even have that STAR pre on a note sheet just in case. And you might get more than one in an interview, by the way. You might get a few in a row of these behavioral type based questions. All right, we're actually going to practice. So get your mics ready, open them up now. You're going to tell me whether this is a good STAR answer. Does it have all the different aspects to it?
With what they did. So it would be a little bit more helpful to get information about what the person actually did to help that situation become better.
Yeah, they said that they proposed to address the issue, but was anything done? Right.
They also, I don't think they said what the result was.
That's correct. There's absolutely zero result in there, too. Right. So there's kind of a few things off on that one. All right, let's try another one. I'll read too. Every time my company came out with a new service or promotion, I would organize a sales competition for my staff. I would split the staff into 2 teams. The team who had sold the most by the end of the promotion would have dinner made for them by the other team. It was a fun way to build teamwork and to ensure that my division met its sales goals.
There is no problem that is exactly stated.
Agree. What else?
It's also like very general because it says every time, like it's better to have a specific time.
It's not really describing what it's actually solving. It's just kind of like saying something that happened at their workplace.
Correct. And since it's not describing something to solve, it certainly didn't give a result, did it? It was a fun way to ensure my division met its sales goals. Were sales goals met? Were they changed? Was there an uptick? We have no idea. All right. We were supposed to have a new store display set up by opening time the next day, but the assistant manager who was responsible for displays was out sick with pneumonia. I volunteered to do the display. The store manager was so pleased with my work, she gave me a raise.
I think it would be better, this response would be better if she describes, or the person described why the manager was pleased with my work or that person's work, like what did they do differently when doing the display. I think the situation is set out pretty well, but then also with the result, I wonder if it's maybe not the best thing to be describing like the raise as the thing that motivated you. Maybe if you said, oh, I was able to step out of my responsibilities or learn something new, that would be better.
Mm-hmm. Very good, Deborah.
They also don't state the specific task they did while they volunteered to do the display and how it benefited their team.
Yeah, it's implied that they did the work because they talked somewhat about a result, but didn't actually say what they did in terms of doing the display.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if I was the recruiter who had asked this question, my follow-up would be, what did you specifically do?
Yeah.
Because I don't know what this person actually did. They volunteered to do the display, but again, that did not tell me what they actually did.
Yeah.
So if you say something like that when you're interviewing, that's what the interview team is going to do. They're going to ask a clarifying question around the element that you did not address. You know, so just be prepared, because again, we're not, you know, we're not trained from when we're young to answer questions in a STAR method, right? So as much as we practice, we might not always give a full STAR answer when we're being interviewed. So that's where the interview team is going to come back with a clarifying question to you and say, so what was the result of that project? Or what exactly did you do in that project?
So a complete STAR answer is the goal, but don't worry if they end up asking you clarifying. Right. That's exactly right. Okay. One last one, I believe. I volunteered for and was nominated the head of a committee of 4 people tasked with investigating poor customer reviews. I analyzed reviews and discovered that customer wait times were the largest contributor to negative reviews. I then led a brainstorming situation with my team to find a solution. This solution was a change in workflow for mechanics. After implementing my suggestion, wait times dropped 18%.
I liked how they specifically quantified the result. I thought that was good.
Yes.
I also like, sorry.
Go ahead.
You can go if you want, Caroline.
You sure? Okay. I also liked how they gave a lot of detail about what the specific situation was and how like they mentioned it was specifically like poor customer reviews and not just like customer reviews.
Very good.
In the end of this like problem, there was like a good like response, like reaction to what they did. So they made it pretty clear what happened.
Yes. Trutha?
I was just gonna say, like, they present, like Caroline said, a really specific situation. They say, like, they go like in a chronological order where they explain what happened, the problem, and then what they did to solve it. And they're really specific with everything they did and the final solution too.
That made it really easy to understand too. Yeah, that is a really good example. Okay, guess what? Katie's gonna get her breakout skills going here, and you guys are gonna get a chance to practice this with a partner. All right, you're gonna have 5 minutes in a breakout room with somebody that's gonna be put together with somebody that Katie's got the pairing set up. You have 5 minutes. You're gonna get popped out of that breakout at the end of 5 minutes. So keep an eye on your time, because you want to spend half the time with one being the interviewer and the other being the interviewee, and then switch. So 2.5 minutes about each. You're going to answer a behavioral question. So one of you is going to actually ask the question. Katie, can they still see this screen when they're in the break room? I'm guessing not.
They can't, but you could take a screenshot on it on your computer. Or...
So write this down or take a screenshot. One of you is going to ask the question to the other and vice versa. What sorts of things did you do in school or work that went beyond your own or others' expectations?
Can we type it into the chat? Can they still access the
yes.
chat?
Perfect. We'll do that too. All right. Katie, you can let her fly whenever you're ready.
Yeah, the rooms are open, so they should be able to join them.
What do they have to do to join them?
They should just have a button on their screen to click join the room, or at the bottom of the screen there's a breakout rooms tab and you can click that.
Okay.
If the pop-up didn't show up. So it looks like people are joining the room. If you're having
Katie, they're going to get a 1 minute reminder too, is that right?
Yep, they'll get a 1 minute reminder.
Thank you, Andy. Oh, Devna, did you not get a partner?
Let's see, Devna, if you are having troubles, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there should be a breakout rooms tab kind of on the line that there's like the mute button and the stop video. There should be a participants chat. If you click on the breakout rooms, you should be able to join room 6.
Almost. Devna, are you there? Can you unmute? I think maybe she's frozen.
Oh, there she goes.
There she goes. Good job, Katie.
Yeah.
Hey, Katie, why don't you, let's just pause the recording.
Okay.
HR.
Well, hang on. We ask that. They're all coming back, Russ.
Okay.
Let's have you ask that when we go to there, okay?
All right.
We'll want to remember to turn the recording back on. Oh, we did.
Yep. Back. Katie's on top of it, always. Right? Do we have everybody back? Not quite.
Not quite. They'll close in 10 seconds. So.
Okay. Some finished early. I'm impressed.
Everyone should be back now.
All right. All right. What did you guys think? Was it easy because you have STAR and you've had practice for 5 minutes? What did you think?
It was kind of hard. I like expected it to be easier because when we were talking about like the tell me a time where you faced a conflict question, like I was going through like my situation in my head and I thought I like had a pretty good answer. But then when I actually had to answer like the next question in my room, I kind of struggled and I felt like I repeated myself a lot because I was just, instead of using like filler words, I just like said the same thing over again.
Yeah, and just like Russ said, in general, practicing interviewing really helps you get better. Practicing these STAR questions, maybe you can get a friend or somebody to practice them with you, is a pretty good idea. Just so you know, part of the packet we'll talk about in a second has a couple of documents that have example ones, real ones that we use at our workplace. So that will give you some different ones to practice. So other thoughts?
It was hard thinking of like a really specific example from like a work experience I had. And so it was like I was able to like get the different like steps of the STAR, but I feel like my example wasn't specific enough.
Excellent. See, and hopefully now you can see too where that prep work I talked about of having that sheet of just kind of even reminding you of various projects and experiences. When you get that question live, helping that to think through different ones to come up with an example. I really think that could be helpful. Any last comments on that? Go ahead.
So like in this situation, what if you like you can't really think of a specific situation where that could like accurately answer the question because it's like a little bit stressful, and would you just like say I can't currently think of it? Or
I would, first of all, I wouldn't say that too quickly, right? Do actually keep thinking through, work hard, try to find an example. And then rather than saying that, I would say, I don't have an example that exactly fits, but this is at least, I think, somewhat related, and maybe try something like that. If you just literally feel like you don't, just answer honestly and said, I can't think of one right now. But take your time, think it through. Katie, that sound okay from your point of view?
Yeah, and I would say, you could say, I'm having a hard time thinking of an example for that particular question. Could we go on to another question? And then a lot of times, your mind's going to keep working. And while you're answering another question, you might think of an answer. And so you might say, can we go to another question? And if I think of an answer to this one, I can then provide that as well. And that is very fine to do that. It happens.
how much time like we take to like think about our answer? Like a minute? Would that be too much?
It can be a few minutes. I have sat there for a long time, and good interviewers will give you that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
and truthfully, I am one of those people where I don't want to say I blank, but when I get asked a question on the spot, sometimes it takes me a while to think. So that's why I always have a cheat sheet. I know they're going to ask about a conflict. They're going to maybe ask me about, a team that I worked on. They're going to ask something I'm proud of, what I've accomplished. So I will go in with some examples, and I will actually say this project, and I'll actually list STAR, and then I will have one word by each of those letters so that it's quicker for me to remember a response. But a lot of times a certain project can be used to answer maybe 2 or 3 different questions that you get asked in an interview, because the questions are going to go to different things, and you may use the same project or the same situation for multiple answers, and that is very okay to do.
Good stuff.
Katie, I have a question. Is it typical for them to be asked to provide or to state their weaknesses or their needs for professional growth?
It's a great question. I would say some people might still ask that, but it's rarer because people have gone to the behavioral based interviewing.
Right.
But some might say, you know, give me a couple examples of strengths and weaknesses. And of course,
Yes.
nowadays we don't like to say weakness. We do
Right.
say area for growth or opportunity for growth. You know, a lot of times that's how we'll phrase it. What have you already recognized as an opportunity for growth?
Right.
You know,
You can say, I'd like to get better at X, if that's, otherwise
Yep.
don't offer anything like that if not asked directly.
Yeah, yeah,
Got it.
yeah. Good question.
Okay, I am going to move us on. We have one last step after the interview, and I'm going to throw this to Katie, who's more of an expert on this.
Yeah. So I mentioned about finding the email address out for the people you interview with. Sending an email thank you note, it can again be a differentiator between you and other candidates. So I would take a few minutes to do this after each interview. Again, you want to make it different though for each person you interview. So if you interview with a total of 4 people for one position at one company, you need to customize each thank you note to that person and try to reflect on something that they asked or that you spoke with them directly about. So you don't want to send the same exact email to every person because they do compare. But again, this is very infrequent nowadays when interviewers get thank you notes. So it can help make you stand out. I recommend 12 to 24 hours of doing it after the interview, and especially if it's late in the day that you're interviewing. Don't worry about doing it maybe until the next day if you have things you have to get done. But within 24 hours, it's nice to send off that thank you note. And same thing as when you're doing your resume, make sure you spell check, read it through a couple times. But it doesn't have to be long, it can be a few sentences, but it's a nice touch.
Yeah, could I comment, Katie, that sometimes you may not know or have that email address information for interviewers. Maybe you were contacted by an HR person, and that's the lone contact that you have for the company. So for them to forward it onto the committee would be very appropriate.
Very.
Okay, so we are at the end of our material, however, and we're running a little bit behind, but not too bad. I need to spend a little more time with you because we need to talk about how to prepare for